As it turns out, I didn't have any idea for my next video, but as I was just lying on a couch, chilling and having fun and relaxing, I suddenly watched something very inspirational.
I'm not going to answer the question.
Why
because
would you answer that
because
question?
the question
you want to put a lot
is
of
the
new
question
Supreme Court
is
justice,
the
radical
question,
left.
Will you shut up, man?
Listen, who is on your?
Yeah, very inspirational. I don't know when you're watching this video, but in the time that I'm recording it, everyone is kind of like holding their breaths and trying to predict who the next president of the United States is going to be. And I felt like I'm not a politician and I don't know anything about who's the best person. But I know how to do a little bit of cool things with the data. So I started watching the debates, and as I watched, new ideas of visualizations and also analysis came into my mind, and I felt like maybe I can just make a video out of it and tell you guys what I found from the analysis that I did in this week.
Okay, so right now I'm just in my Colab notebook and I just want to show you how I kind of like visualize all these things. I'm not going to go into too much detail about the code, but I'm going to just show you exactly what I've kind of like visualized. Well, the first thing that we want to understand in the paragraph level is that how many times each person starts talking in each minute. As you can see, this axis is related to the minute, and it's about 95 minutes because the first debate is around, I guess, 1 hour and 35 minutes. And here we have mediator one. I actually substituted the name of the mediator with mediator because it's kind of like easier to see and visualize. And then we have Joe Biden and Donald Trump. Well, actually, the uh, interesting thing about this whole plot is that when you have, for example, in here, when Joe Biden, I'm sorry, tends to use more sentences than usual, like 14 sentences in just 1 minute. Just in the same minute, Trump tries to just prove his point. Even interestingly, the mediator goes out of his normal and usual way and tries to like calm these two people down, and even he starts like firing at these two to stop them from interrupting each other and just making a mess. But in general, if you look at the big picture, you see that three parts are the most, or the kind of like the darkest parts of the whole picture. One after when they kind of like introduce themselves and are warming up, one in the middle, and one at the end before the whole like debate finishes. But the interesting thing is that after each time they start like talking a lot, the mediator, I guess, starts to like get a little bit angry and tries to like calm them down. And here, hopefully, he kind of like accomplishes his goal. And for example, 20 minutes, I guess, they don't start like that kind of like interruption and the hot discussion that they used to have. And again, in here you can see there's a little bit of, less dark area because they are kind of like cooling a little bit until they start again and kind of like fire at each other again. So this was the first debate, but when we try to like visualize the second debate, we see that first of all it's a little bit shorter, about like 66 minutes, whereas the other one was about like 95 minutes. And if we want to just compare these two debates, we can say that the biggest number of sentences each one uses in this second one is 11, whereas the other one was about, I guess, 15. So after all, I think there's been a big improvement in this one, but there are still some like parts again, like after warming up and in the middle and at the end when they try to like talk more than usual. But I think it's been a very kind of like better debate. So next up, we're going to go to the sentence level. Actually, here we're going to like use a sentence detector and then tokenize each paragraph into sentences. Sorry if I just go a little bit too much up and down. Okay, so in this graph, what I plotted is that first of all, I compared the first and second debate. You can see that the first debate was kind of like longer and naturally it had more sentences. On the right hand side, we can see like how many sentences each one uses in each debate. And also we have the percentage of like how much each one dominates the conversation or the debate. And interestingly, in both debates, Donald Trump is the person who dominates more than 40% of the debate by using like around 800 sentences, more than like 130 sentences than Joe Biden. Also, he uses like around 200 words more than Joe Biden. Well, while analyzing the number of sentences, I thought that maybe the number of sentences is not actually showing all the characteristics of the debaters. So I thought that maybe if we want to see that whether a person is someone who interrupts in other person's talk, we have to actually count the number of sentences each time they start talking. So I went on and actually did this and reached something like this. The interesting thing is that here, actually, let me just explain to you what this means. Here, the y-axis is the number of sentences, and the x-axis shows the number of sentences that they use each time they start talking. Like here, when we have 1 and 187 for Trump, it means that Trump for 187 times used only one sentence when he started talking. And for example, this number is about like 30 to kind of like 40 times more than what Joe Biden actually does, and like how many times Joe Biden uses one sentence when he starts talking. And this shows that for 40 times, around like 40 times, Donald Trump was either like being succinct and just like answering the questions very briefly, or he was kind of like, trying to interrupt the other person's speech. And this actually, again, is being repeated in the second debate as well. But as you can see, this time Trump and also Biden are being so much more, I guess, polite. And for less than 100 times, they are trying to use only one sentence when they start speaking. Although you might say that the second debate was a lot shorter than the first one, so they didn't have that much time to like interrupt in each other's speech, I think otherwise. And I say that, this drop of 100 times is something that I think they did themselves, especially when they had the option of the mute button to mute the other person's speech when they are trying to talk or they have the time to talk about a specific subject. So after plotting all these kind of like sentence level plots, I wanted to go a little bit further and go to word level. And what I did here, firstly, I wanted to just remove all the like stop words like is, he, she, and it, and just get rid of all these things that everyone uses every day in their lives. But I thought like, I can make a list of all the stop words that I think are not important, and then see if some, for example, pronouns are being used more often in someone's speech. Like one person may use I or he or she or whatever more, and this can show a part of their personality. So what I did, I was that I made a custom list of all the stop words that I didn't want to see in my list, and then removed the punctuations and came up with the most common words used by each candidate. And I'm kind of like really glad that I did such a thing, because when you look at the tree map that I just plotted here, you can see that there are kind of like really interesting things. Like Trump uses the word you when he wants to refer to Biden, although Biden, on the other hand, tries to like kind of imply his meaning or even talk to the mediator instead of talking to Trump when he wants to address his opponent. Another interesting thing is that Trump uses the pronoun I twice as much as Biden does. And, I don't want to conclude anything or say anything about each personality, but you can kind of like understand the personality of each one by looking at how they talk and the lexicon that they use. Uh, and one another thing that I can see for, the first time that I look at it is that Trump mostly uses kind of like special words when he tries to talk, and like 10% of the first 60 words that he uses is just dedicated to you, and another 10% is dedicated to I. But Biden, on the other hand, is someone who I guess like tries to use different words or even uses, special words less than Trump does. So he has a wider kind of like, not wider, or maybe a little bit more dispersed way of talking. So after just, having all these things in here, you can use all these words that were used by each one and make a cool and cute word cloud. Well, when you want to make a word cloud, just remember that you have to have the words and also a mask if you want to give it a kind of like cool shape. And also you can use my repository to get the like pictures with transparent backgrounds. And for each one, I kind of like cropped these pictures out and then kind of like exported their picture and got these kind of like pictures as the result. So next step, I wanted to analyze the sentiment of the sentences they use. So what I did was that I dedicated a row to each sentence, and then I used different packages to see which one performs best. And I'm gonna just very quickly go over what polarity and subjectivity is and how we're going to calculate it. But you can learn about each one by just going to these links that I provided for you in the Colab and Kaggle notebook. Well, here, what you have to know about polarity is that it's a metric between -1 and +1 that shows how positive or negative the sentiment of one sentence is. And also, subjectivity is a kind of metric that shows how subjective a sentence is, and how, like, how the person who's talking about something is referring to himself or his opinion when he's trying to state that, for example, sentence. So for calculating these two, we use a package called TextBlob. And what TextBlob does is that it actually identifies the phrases and also the words that it has in its lexicon, and then uses those words' polarity in order to come up with a number that can kind of like represent the whole sentiment of the sentence. So in general, I'm not going to go into detail about this one, but I kind of printed out the different values of polarity that this package gives to each sentence, so you can have a better understanding and intuition about how it works. But even in the extreme cases, there are some problems. Just like how I talked about it, can understand some certain things. We can see that this sentence is recognized as a negative, actually negative like sentence. It's like a bad thing that fewer people are dying every day. But in general, like sentences like "we've done a great job" is recognized as a very positive and good thing to say. Uh, so I've also printed out and plotted the polarity. But again, I'm not going to talk about this. You can go ahead and check it out on your own and see what it actually is giving, or whether or not it's giving a right and correct representation of our data. So what I did was that I said, okay, I want to just get the best result possible, because I cannot possibly like sit here and label all the data by myself. So what I did was that I said, okay, there are a lot of amazing, great deep learning models that can help me with this task. So there's a package that you can use in order to do all these cool things. Actually, get access to all these different models, and it's called transformers. By using transformers, you can use their pipelines, which gives you the kind of like advantage of using only one or two lines of code to kind of like analyze your sentences or your data and label them as positive or negative. But still, this wasn't what I wanted, and I kind of like wrote about the advantages and disadvantages that this pipeline has, but I'm just gonna skip here and talk about the kind of like best approach that I found for classifying the sentiment of this data set. So what the best approach was that actually I went on the internet and searched and searched and finally found a data set that is for I guess 6 years ago, that kind of like is about sentiment analysis on movie reviews. Uh, if you just go on Kaggle, you can just find it and see how the data is and how many labels it has. And interestingly, I found that it has 5 different labels, and it kind of classifies the text from negative to positive. And the cool thing was that I thought, okay, so I'm going to use this data set and train a model, for example, a Roberta model that can give me the best results, and then use this model on the debate data set if it performed well on the testing set. And interestingly, I did this and got very good results by submitting my results to Kaggle and kind of like use the transfer learning by using that model on the debate dataset. And the link to all these things that I talked about is in my both my Kaggle and Colab kernels. So here I'm gonna just skip this part and go to the part where I presented and also visualized my results with Roberta. So here, as you can see, what we get is so much more precise and concrete because now our model can understand the different sentiments and words that were used so much better. So interestingly, we can see how Trump is in general ahead, I think, of Biden when it comes to expressing his emotions in his sentences. Uh, and also, there's one little like thing that is an exception when it comes to the first debate in somewhat positive sentences, where Biden uses around, I guess, yes, 3 sentences more with somewhat positive sentiment than Trump. But in general, when we compare both debates, we can see that the first debate was kind of like a little bit more hostile, I think. And in general, it is bigger, its bar plot is bigger than the second one because it was longer in general. But I think the debaters in the second debate tried to kind of like keep the hostility out of the debate by using more maybe positive sentences, being a little bit more polite, and maybe interrupt a little bit less, especially when they had the mute button. But in general, this was what I thought about the whole thing. I really love to hear about what you guys think about the whole plots, also visualizations, and your analysis on these plots.
Also, I have a Medium article that you can go and see all the visualizations in there. And yeah, that's it, I guess. But also thank you to all the people on Kaggle, Transformers Forum, who helped me understand different models and come up with new things. I'm really grateful for you guys. Thank you. And don't forget to like and subscribe. And that's it.